We've got a poem by John Ashbery called "Just Walking Around," and it's just really important. It's become a really important poem around here, and I guess we're about to explore why. We're going to take some time to do it. So let's listen to John Ashbery perform the poem first in his typically unmodulated, quasi-monotone sort of way.
This one's called "Just Walking Around." What name do I have for you? Certainly there is no name for you in the sense that the stars have names that somehow fit them. Just walking around, an object of curiosity to some. But you are too preoccupied by the secret smudge in the back of your soul to say much, and wander around, smiling to yourself and others. It gets to be kind of lonely, but at the same time off-putting, counterproductive, as you realize once again that the longest way is the most efficient way, the one that looped among islands, and you always seemed to be traveling in a circle. And now that the end is near, the segments of the trip swing open like an orange. There is light in there, and mystery, and food. Come see it. Come not for me, but it. But if I am still there, grant that we may see each other.
Okay, Max, you, when we start talking, you'll have the first line, "What name do I have for you?" Lily, you have "Certainly there is no name for you." Anna, in the sense that stars have names that somehow fit them. Allie, "Just walking around," you have. Dave, "An object of curiosity to some." Amaris, "But you are too occupied by the secret smudge in the back of your soul to say much." Emily, "And wander around, smiling to yourself and others." Does that sound familiar? Max, "It gets to be kind of lonely, but at the same time off-putting." Lily, you have "counterproductive," the word. Anna, you have, as you realize once again, that the longest way around is the most efficient way. That's, that's the anthemic line, I think. Okay, Allie, you have the one that looped among islands, and you always seem to be traveling in a circle. You've got both of those, okay? Dave, you've got "now that the end is near." Amaris, "the segments of the trip swing open like an orange." Emily, "there is light in there, and mystery and food." Max, "come see it." Lily, "come not for me, but it." Anna, "but if I'm still here, grant that we may see each other." Okay, so Max, you have the first one. "What name do I have for you?" Go.
It seems like actually a very kind of classic, traditional way to open a love poem, right? Like what is this thing? How do I call this? Or what is the word for this feeling or for this object that I love or desire? Mm-hmm. And so I think, we don't know exactly who or what he's addressing. It might not necessarily be a person. It might be an address to this act of just walking around, mm-hmm. Which he's named there in the title, but he's still not sure that is the name.
So you might be a person, you might be the poem, you might be the self.
Yep. Could be a number of things, for
mm-hmm.
sure.
What, before we turn to Lily on the next line, what kind of question is it? Is it an existential question?
It is, yeah. It's there's no answer to that question, is what I think. It's a question about the inability, really, to name this thing that he wants to name, or that he doesn't want to name, or that he says he can't name.
I have a name for you, but it's not really going to do the work.
Yeah.
I really don't. There's something about you that's unnameable, and so the name I could give you would be arbitrary.
Yeah.
Is anybody? I'm moved by that line. Why? Isn't it? Emily, you're moved by it too. Why would that be?
Because there's something heartbreaking that this person who works primarily in the realm of language is acknowledging that the thing that's most urgent to say is also totally unsayable. What point is poetry, to some extent language, if it can't communicate the things that are most important to us and the people we love?
Come be with me and be my love, or whatever the traditional notion of having, holding, and naming, all of it done well, all of it done perfectly, all of it done to completion, so that in the end the poem does the work of the love. And this is starting off by saying, it's always going to be not good enough for what I'm feeling. Okay, Lily, certainly there is no name for you.
A couple of things. One, it seems grammatically to be an answer to the question that he's posing in the first line.
Yeah.
And I also find the second line moving because it's not just what name do I have for you, sort of like denying the possessiveness of love, if we're going to say that this poem's about love, or the possessiveness or that's involved in naming something.
Yeah.
Like, what name do I have? That's a possessive, like, I call you my lover, or we're an exclusive couple, whatever. So he's saying that not only do I not have a name, but that one does not exist. Mm. So he's already inviting us to, in the space of the poem, live in that. I almost think of it as like, when you're talking about something and you're like, you realize all of a sudden that there's no word to describe the feeling or the act that you're doing. So he's, right from the get-go, wants us to be there in that space where we're doing something not quite nameable.
That's so well put. And I have two questions for you. One is there already, you know Ashbery well, so you can apply your general knowledge of Ashbery to this question, but is there an idea or a theory about naming, about linguistic denotation here being assumed?
Well, to name something in a traditional sense means, like I was saying earlier, to possess it and to take away some of its own essence, because you are applying a name or a label.
Ironically, to take away its essence by naming it.
Because you make it more clear and more obviously knowable. And for Ashbery, that's his poetry basically lives in a space where that's impossible, or that's something he has difficulty doing. Right.
So an inheritance from Dickinson and others in Ashbery is the fundamental notion that this works, been there, done that, as Stein says, or as Ashbery said of Gertrude Stein in a review that he wrote of Stanzas in Meditation. To name something isn't all that interesting, right? I want to write something that can't be done. This can be done. Right. Well done. Thank you, Lily. Certainly there is no name for you in the sense that the stars have names. So now he's clarifying a little bit more.
Yeah, but what's interesting about choosing stars for that clarification is that all the stars have different names in different languages, and all the constellations are either grouped the same and are named differently, or grouped differently. Like, one culture may borrow a star from this constellation and put it over in this one. And so I think
we've talked about this before. What is a constellation in human evolutionary terms? That is to say, the last 10,000 years or so, we've decided to name all the stars. But what would the stars have to say about that, or the people living on those stars? I guess you can't live on a star. People living near those stars would say of our naming of their stars.
What are you doing?
Yeah, like arbitrary.
Yeah.
Anything more?
But it's interesting that stars also function, like, historically as a way of explanation of that mythological, these stars are grouped together because that's a bear, or because this hero was thrown up there after he glimpsed Artemis bathing or whatever.
But this is negative, right?
Yeah.
Certainly there is no name for you in the sense that stars do have names. In other words, this is different. What Ashbery is saying to the you is, my recognition that you have no name is unlike the naming of stars. You want to work with that a little bit?
That the stars have been assigned and it's somehow fixed.
And arbitrarily.
And arbitrarily so.
And he's in a mood in this poem, as Lily described for us, where he doesn't want that kind of naming. Right? Again, Lily, why? Why doesn't he want it? What mood is he in?
He wants to exist in a space where we're constantly challenged by the fact that there is no name for what we're doing, meaning that if we were able to name it, it would be much more knowable and therefore less of itself.
And it so contradicts, Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment thought. It's worth noting how radical all this is, isn't it? The notion all along through the progressive eras of the 19th century in particular was that the better we were at naming things and at pointing things and denoting things and mapping things and settling things and discovering things and learning things, was that would be progress. And at least in the realm of love or identity, he's saying that's not progress. That's what Lily's saying here. And, I had the honor of sitting next to John Ashbery in 2013 in New York, as Lily coordinated this crazy thing where John was not feeling well enough to spend a second day at the Writers' House, so we went to New York. I sat with him in his apartment, and his partner and supporter, editor, life companion, David, was sitting in the back of the room, and John said, as he explained this poem to me, that the poem is really about David. It was about a lot of things. And David had sort of known that, but not really known that. It was a great moment. It was a powerful, emotional moment for the elderly Ashbery to really be saying explicitly that this poem is a love poem. It's also about what language can do to diminish. So, Lily, I'm back to you. You hinted at this, but I want a little more on this. In a classification category sense, if John is saying to a person he loves, there is no name for you, meaning I don't know what to call you in the sense of who you are to me. You want to go a little more with that?
Well, it's also like going back to naming constellations, that's like a way to make our universe smaller, in a way to say that we have some mastery over it, or that there's it's not as scary as we think, or it's not as infinite as we think. And so for Ashbery, he would prefer there be sort of an infinite space to wander, possibility, and sort of ambiguity is positively construed and not negatively.
What about in the realm of identity and identity politics? Anyone?
Well, there's also a sense with the stars, at least for a layman, that that the names are the only thing that differentiate them from us, for us. So if we didn't know, oh, that's serious, this is so-and-so, then like the only way we know them is, it's just hard to tell that spot of light billions of light years away from like this spot of light. And the only way to make sense of that is in their relation to each other, which then are the constellations.
And putting a name on not just the object, the person you love, but the relationship, right? Classifying or categorizing that relationship. You know, John Ashbery has never been explicitly or even implicitly, a radical gay activist, but he's always been uncomfortable with the way in which relationship is named. Relation between and among words, relation between and among people, starting with Some Trees, right? Some Trees was really about how our relationship is going to be described by the degree to which we walk away from the world, and that's the best we can do. So dedicating this poem to David is a way of saying there is no name for what we are to each other. Because, and that's an issue, not just for same-sex couples, but for any version of gendering that has to check a box that says husband, wife, spouse, partner, life partner, supporter, editor, friend, super dear friend, the only one, Penelope to Ulysses. There is no name for this. Let's not try to do that. That's a great reason to support postmodernism, really. Okay, boy, we're riffing on this. We're just walking around. Certainly there is no name for you in the sense that the stars have names that somehow fit them. I think you had that already. Did we cover that, sir? Okay. Period. Just walking around. That kind of follows, and it also doesn't follow. Go ahead. You got it. No pressure. This is the big thing.
Well,
It's the
first
title.
of all, it's important that, that it does kind of come out of nowhere, but at the same time, when you are just walking around and you don't necessarily have a destination, and you're just kind of moving, you arrive at these thoughts that you're not really trying to think, but you often end up having some of your most profound thoughts when you're just in that state of observing and just seeing things. So this previous the stanza that we've been talking about could be a result of this is what is being thought about when the narrator's walking around. Although it also
Why just walking around? Not walking around, but just walking around. Great word.
because it's such a simple activity that almost everyone does at some point. It's so unremarkable.
Unremarkable. Let's all riff on this, walking around. Max, what do you, I know you're so purposeful that you hardly ever just walk around, but when you do, what is it? What's it about?
It's about relaxing, about thinking, being outside, enjoying myself.
You're smart, you're productive, you're in a degree program, you have a place to go, you have people to see, you have objectives. And all of us are like this, right? But the question is, what's the alternative? Is the alternative not having an object of motion, not having a destination?
Just passing time.
Passing time, as Dylan said, I'm just sitting here watching the river flow. So just walking around, and of course this, unlike watching the river flow, which I can't imagine Ashbery doing, but I can imagine him walking around. Wallace Stevens wrote his poems in the walk from his West Hartford home to the Hartford Accident and Indemnity Company, where he had a dull job as an insurance executive. His poems were written just walking around, and they have that same serial, going nowhere quality.
Frank O'Hara, too, I think is...
Frank O'Hara! I mean, what poem in Modpo is really just walking around from O'Hara?
A step away from them.
A step away from them, which is really about walking. And this has become an important 20th century trope, right? The flaneur, right? The looking at all the things, right?
And taking it in.
And it's become a compositional model and mode. I think that's what's so great. Just walking around. Okay, before we move on then, just walking around in the context of metapoetry, in the context of interpretation. Who wants to bite? Emily?
Well, is it a way of writing which is, in a sense, unstructured, and an interpretation which doesn't abide by any specific hermeneutic also?
Yes. Yep, keep going. Anybody else?
Well, it's
Lily?
also,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's also a way of reading, right? The way that we, when we started to close read this, you assigned us parts, so there is kind of a steps one foot in front of the other kind of way. But if I was doing this on my own, I might read through it once, and then I'd go back maybe here to the second stanza, and then maybe I'd move down to the fourth, and then maybe go back to the beginning again.
There is a purposeful line-by-line sequencing discussion, which we've done when we have less time. But we're deliberately taking more time with this discussion, and therefore this discussion, I have no notes. This discussion is simply going to go where it's going to go. And if Allie says something really great, we're just going to go there. We're trying to just walk around. I mean, I think that when the 8 or 9 of us get to a point in these discussions which are unscripted and never retaken, when someone says something really brilliant, the whole discussion will go in that way. At our best, that's what we're doing. Ashbery models an open interpretation and a just walking around as an interpretive hermeneutic model, as well as a compositional model, as well as a model for what we love. And those things are really all together. Lily, you were going to say something before.
Well, I guess I want to push back a little on it's not like it's just walking around, but as it stands, in contrast to aimlessly walking around, because, for example, Anna said, "Step away from them," the Frank O'Hara poem.
Yeah.
He ends the poem by saying his heart is in his pocket,
Yeah.
and it's a book of poetry.
Pierre Reverdy.
And so I always read that as that sort of like an engine that's sort of driving him through to take that walk. So It's not aimless. It's having your heart in your pocket, like something you can kind of hold onto as you're walking and feel as you're walking around, and it's kind of guiding you along. And it's not aimless. We're not going just anywhere.
This is not completely. There is a net in this tennis game, and that net is a line-by-line movement that seems a little eccentric and circumnavigational, but in the end is definitely going to be a kind of counterproductivity that's quite productive. Good point. Okay, just walking around, an object of curiosity to some. Dave, why would a person who's just walking around be an object of curiosity?
I think that refers more to just walking around, the concept, which I said before, it could be just passing time, but it's just going through life. But just walking around, it focuses on the journey. That's what it's talking about. And an object of curiosity to some are really curious about the journey, the walk, not where you're going, but the actual walk itself.
So you're reading it somewhat literally.
Mm-hmm.
What about those other people who look at him and see him as an object of curiosity. Allie?
I think there's some sense that his head is in the clouds.
He's one of those guys.
And so people might,
There he goes again.
yeah.
Stevens walking to work. Oh boy, there's Mr. Stevens. We know not to interrupt Mr. Stevens when he's doing that weird poet thing.
It's kind of like the song Belle at the beginning of Beauty and the Beast. Like, oh, sorry, that's like way kind of a stretch.
Well, we're just walking around, so go wherever you need to go.
Yeah, but it's just like, oh, Belle, like, so obsessed with books, so unlike the rest of us.
She's got her nose in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the town intellectual Belle is, right? So there's a certain fuzzy headedness. This is a self-parody in a way. Like that's who I am, just walking around an object of curiosity to some. Amaris, you are too preoccupied by the secret smudge in the back of your soul. Do you have the next line too?
To say much.
To say much.
I guess, well, first off, secrecy denotes having something to conceal, and the smudge seems to indicate that thing that you want to conceal is an imperfection or a flaw, and being preoccupied and sort of navel gazing or looking inwards obscures the vision of the other. And it seems in Ashbery's formulation, the result of that is that you're unable to be in the state of vulnerability you need to be in to express yourself. Rather, you seem to be enclosed and sort of self-incarcerated at the back of your soul even. So it impedes the whole project at the beginning. Maybe in the metapoetic sense, it could be a preoccupation with an inability to express what he wants to express that is preventing him from just enjoying that journey.
Okay, that's great. Now say again, really succinctly, why having a secret smudge in the back of your soul and obsessing about that leads you to say not much?
Well, I guess it's focusing and yet diverting your attention from what matters, which is exploring all the possibilities, exploring the ambiguity that's available in that sort of wandering meditation.
Is the saying not much a negative?
I think so at this point in the poem. Maybe it changes later on, but
Anybody else?
I've read that negatively.
Anybody else? You're too preoccupied with the secret smudge in the back of your soul to say much.
Don't say much when you're keeping a secret, when you're getting defensive about it.
What is this secret smudge in the...
I don't see it as a negative. I don't really see it as something with a value judgment. It just seems like another thing that is part of who this person is.
What is the secret smudge in the back of your soul?
I always read that as that thing that you're just like constantly and will always be profoundly embarrassed that you said or did. You know, like everyone has that thing that like sometimes when you are just walking around, it kind of comes back to like haunt you a little bit.
Smudge is such an interesting word.
Yeah.
You're saying that it has something of a devalued connotation, some error, some silliness.
But then it's like...
But I actually think it's quite a positive word for John Ashbery.
It's still something, it's something that is part of you, right? Like we're not all perfect all the time, and we all have those little things that kind of come back and haunt us. And
But you say haunt, so I think
I don't necessarily
I
haunt,
see
like,
Ashbery's secret smudge as the wonderful fuzziness and indecipherability and the thing that actually has made him the poet that he is. It's that thing that's different, wired different about him, that he knows he has and he comes up, sometimes laughs about. So maybe we're not far off on this.
I also think that just getting back to language and the whole discussion before about not naming things, the secret smudge, when you're writing and you smudge something out, I think that indecipherability is really important because it's like that essential unit that no one else will ever know, and you'll never really be able to express it to anyone else.
So there's a parallel to the opening of the poem,
Yeah.
right? Having no name. Amaris?
I find that really interesting. I agree with all that. Why too preoccupied then?
Too preoccupied is
As
part of the
opposed to just-
grammar of not saying much. You're too preoccupied to say
I
much.
see. Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's come back to that, but let's move on as well. You are too preoccupied by the secret smudge in the back of your soul to say much and wander around, smiling to yourself and others.
Yeah. Smiling to yourself and others, first of all, the shortest way to get weird looks and become an object of curiosity on the street is to be smiling to yourself. And, America...
Because why? This has happened to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, because you're not really supposed to have private moments in public, and smiling to yourself is reflecting on a private moment. It's having a type of moment of self-communion, which isn't necessarily private, but doing it in the view of other people.
If you do it a lot, what do people think?
You're bonkers.
You're bonkers. I mean, I think Ashbery would laugh at this. Oh, I'm the kind of guy who, when I'm come up with something good for a poem or come up with a good thought, I smile to myself, and people think, oh, there he goes again. But I want to take it seriously. I want to take I'm going to say neurological difference, or the what might actually be called a disability. I want to take that seriously, and I want for a second, I don't think Ashbery would go this way, right? I don't think he's a disability rights guy, but I think that he's saying that the poet or the person who just walks around, the same poet who discovers the beauty of not knowing what the relationship can be called, is the one who has a smudge that causes him to smile and take pleasure and then be, in a sense, bullied or discriminated against because he has this. Lily, you're nodding. You want to add to that?
I think that I see the smudge as what, going back to what Ali was saying, as like an indecipherability. And so going back to what name do I have for you, certainly there is no name. Instead of naming whatever it is he's coming up with as he's preoccupied by the smudge on the back of his soul, he's smiling, which is a non-linguistic way to somehow symbolize or express the feeling he gets from being preoccupied that doesn't require him to name it.
Does anybody, that's so good, does anybody remember the poem, The One Thing That Can Save America by John Ashbery? I just want to throw that out there bibliographically and recommend it. It's a poem that's probably about being gay in America in the bicentennial, 1976. And in that poem, he calls out to America and says, what I do in my domestic private life actually means something to America. It's like ringing the bells of America. He's basically doing something uncharacteristic there for Ashbery, which is to call out to America to say that what happens to me privately actually can teach us what civic life is in America. So, okay, Emily, did we complete Secret Smudge in the Back of Your Soul to say much and wander around smiling to yourself and others?
I think we did.
Okay, Max, it gets to be kind of lonely, but it's at the same time off-putting.
Well, we're developing this idea here of being the object of curiosity, of being this sort of the bonkers person, as Emily put it. This sort of aimless walking around is, on one hand, very introspective, very alienating for yourself and for others. And I think what's interesting here is how, you mentioned the flaneur earlier, but Ashbery here is like reversing the gaze of the flaneur, and he's not walking around to see things. This is not taking in the blab of the pave or something, or parrying, the shocks of modern life in sort of Benjaminian sense. But rather he's here walking around to be almost consumed as this object of curiosity. Like he is, as the poet, doing this very, I would say, almost Dickinsonian thing, right? Of like just being entirely in your head, even though you're out on the street.
What's the connotation of lonely, Max?
The connotation of lonely?
The word lonely, yeah.
Of being alone, of having no others with you.
So it's
along this
sad,
journey.
I guess.
It's sad. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Can you say something about the loneliness of the poet, generally?
Well, it depends, I think, right? If we're thinking of poets, the sort of minimalist Dickinsonian poets who seem to enjoy that loneliness, right? Or who seem to think of it as a lonely life. Or if you're thinking of these maximalist poets, the Whitmans of the world, who I don't know if it's lonely in the same way, right? I mean, I guess those spectators, those poets, get probably marked and so there's always this kind of this feeling of alienation, of being
Alienation.
off-putting to other people.
Or
But
like Williams and Danse Russe.
oh yeah,
Lonely,
for sure.
lonely,
Yeah.
and best so.
Yeah.
Or Williams and Smell. You know, who will like us if we continue to be this sort of weird poet type? Off-putting, that's a powerful word, right? Say more about off-putting?
It's, I mean, you kind of, I get this image here of Ashbery just kind of out on the street and people just kind of having to double take or sort of keep their distance from him a little bit. I mean, it's also, I think, very sad and devastating to realize that you're being off-putting, right? And that you can't do anything about it.
Some Trees we found to be a very emotionally powerful poem because in part it was about feeling alienated from the world, right? And feeling like you're not connecting. And then going away from it and finding someone in that same space. Mm-hmm. Okay, Lily, counterproductive, new sentence, counterproductive, comma. This is a powerful word, but we should be able to make pretty good work of it.
Well, so counterproductive implies that there is one path that would be considered productive, and whatever you are doing is operating to cause you to be counterproductive, so not productive in the to that idea of whatever the productivity is. Like if it's, you have something you need to accomplish in a timeline, counterproductivity would cause you to be behind.
So productivity is good in
a traditional
American English
sense, yeah. But so I think going back to the last line, lonely but off-putting are two words that shouldn't really be put together, because something that's off-putting implies that there are other people kind of like witnessing to be put off. So at the same, that it seems like it's already in a counterproductive space. Like how can you be lonely and off-putting at the same time?
So let's talk about counterproductivity for a minute, okay? Nobody here would really, truly aspire to counterproductivity. It's got such a negative valence. And yet, this is an anthemic word for us. At the Writer's House, in Modpo, right? Why? I mean, if someone ever asked me to give a commencement address, and they won't, and I haven't, I would read Just Walking Around and ask the graduates to be counterproductive. Okay, so I just sort of gave away what it is with the social consequences of counterproductivity.
I was going to say, how about the instruction manual?
The instruction manual, perfect.
Kind of the anthem of counterproductivity.
Yeah.
The productive thing, as Lily was saying, the productive thing is to write the instruction manual.
Yes.
The counterproductive thing is to take a little imaginary trip to Guadalajara.
And to write the poem, the instruction manual, would turn out to be very productive for him. Anybody want to comment on counterproductivity? I mean, this is really socially alternative, right?
Well, it
Alan,
puts...
do you know anything about counterproductivity?
Totally. Dude. Yeah, it puts more value and more priority on relationship, I think, on kind of just a sensory experience of your environment than a goal. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what, like, just walking around, what is a better example of counterproductivity than that? It's like, it's not to achieve anything, but why are you really here if you're not gonna just, like, exist at times? Like, it's also, I mean, once you get to the question of why you're here, the most productive thing is to reproduce, right? Like, that has the word inside of it.
In a human sense.
But also in a human sense, we don't feel that, like, when we're just going about our regular lives, we're not like, oh, well, like, this is all so that I can, like, spawn, like, generations of other humans. So, I don't know, I think it's a really important, like, fundamental tension between how we want to live with either.
That is interesting. I think that has interesting balances too. Thinking of the queer subject matter, right? Like that. Yeah. This is a love that is not reproductive, right?
How do we want to live our lives? this is a compositional model, compositional mode, and a social mode all at the same time. We've said this a few times. But let's spin off some synonyms for counterproductive, okay? Idiomatic, otherwise. Come on, spin off. Let's hear it.
Procrastinating.
Procrastinating,
Useless.
useless,
Wasting
Lazy.
time.
wasting time, spinning wheels, going nowhere, aimless. The poem is doing all those things deliberately. Counterproductive, who's got this next? Counterproductive as you realize once again, who's got this?
It's me.
I've lost track. Counterproductive as you realize once again that the longest way is the most efficient way. Another Modpo anthemic line.
I mean,
Can you do something with this?
I can try. I guess what's so striking about this is that kind of is that wheel spinning counterproductivity is going to get you there more efficiently than your straight and narrow, do my homework. you know.
Counterintuitively, it's
Yeah.
efficient. And what is it? You didn't quite say what is efficient.
I guess what is efficient is that
What do you realize once again?
you realize once again that where you're really trying to go, which is to this poem,
Mhm.
is not going to be accomplished by sitting at your desk and just writing words.
Okay, let's go back to basics here. What is the American, Ben Franklinian standard instruction about getting somewhere?
Early bird gets the worm.
Earlier gets the worm, Lil?
I think productivity is kind of inherently paternalistic because it's saying like there's one prescribed way to go or to be, and that it's not only that there's a prescribed path, but it should the thing that you get at the end of the path should be the thing that should be the thing that you want, and so that's where kind of productivity sort of comes from. So if the if it's the most efficient way to X, and the X is what we're trying to figure out, I think it's to go back to all the way to the beginning, to have that nameless type of relationship to your partner or your lover or your poetic work.
So we've been taught that if you want to go from A to B, go the straightest, fastest route. Why would you ever go in a circuitous route? Well, if your object, as you say, is to find the X would be the secret smudge, the thing that or the naming of your partner. If that's the X, then to go directly from A to B is going to leave you without any sense of X. But to go in a kind of circumlocucious way, I said circumlocucious as opposed to circumnavigational, because circumlocucious suggests that language is really at stake here. If you wander around in the language, you're in the end going to be more efficient. Lily, you were going to say one more thing.
Because if you want to veer away from paternalistic, there's one way that you have to be and one way you have to go, and enter more into a relationship where there's give and take, and two people are kind of determining the direction and the space to move through, then you can't be productive.
Great. Okay, so we've got that paradox worked out. Thank you, Lily and Anna. And now to modify the way, the one that looped around among islands. Who's got this?
I do.
The one that looped among islands, and you always seem to be traveling in a circle. This sort of continues the thought, right?
Yeah, I find the one that lived among islands to be one of the most touching clauses in the poem.
Really? Say why?
Because just the image of islands and looping around them. He doesn't say the one who's always been stopping off at different islands or touching different islands, but looping around them, just kind of orbiting them in succession.
They're on a trip somewhere, right?
They're on a trip, but also the islands are all so fundamentally separate from each other and distinct, and it kind of brings back the stars, I think, at the beginning of the poem. Everything's just so alone when you get down to it, but that doesn't prevent someone from still discovering them by being in proximity.
Do you want to go on vacation with John Ashbery? It's not going to be a destination vacation. Going to be the itinerary is, well, I don't really know. I think we should loop among islands, and you always seem to be traveling in a circle. He's having fun at his own expense in a way, right? This is funny and charming. And now that the end is near, so he's done all this traveling and looping around, and now he's older, and getting toward the end.
It could be a number of things. Just on the surface, it could be that the poem is coming to an end. It could be that what's referred to in the poem, the trip, is coming to an end. Or it could be that the poet is coming to an end.
Death?
Yeah.
Or the end of the relationship, or both.
And maybe the journey it was referred to up to this point is the poet, is the life.
So the line suggests a certain nostalgia or a reflection of an aged poet, a poet who's been on this journey, this non-journey, a long time.
It's also interesting that the end is near has an effect of making it now seem more interesting or more desperate. Now you're paying attention more, and you've got all this, everything from the poem above is now under your belt. You've got all that knowledge banked, and now everything is more interesting.
It makes just walking around a valediction. Some final words. There is a popular song that has this same line, now the end is near. Anybody know it? Sinatra.
My Way.
Right? My Way. And when did Sinatra sing My Way at his concerts?
At the end.
That was the encore, right? At the risk of being sued by the Sinatra people, I'm actually going to play a little bit of this.
And now the end is near.
So he's quoting, Ashbery's quoting this. So this is his encore. This is Sinatra's goodbye.
I'll say it clear.
And
I'll state
at
my
the end of his
case,
career,
of which I'm certain.
when he did this song, it was as if he's saying to the people in the audience, Sinatra fans, that they're not going to see him again. This is the last word.
And every highway and more, much more than this. I did it my way.
So,
Regret.
My Way. So it's really, I did it my way. Ashbery is not Sinatra in the sense that, the Sinatra piece is very straightforward. But so, Dave, do you have anything further to say about this in the Sinatra sense?
In the Sinatra sense, doing it my way, because everything we talked about being counterproductive, it just calls into question who's determining what's productive, and this is Ashbery's way.
And we should essentially give a standing ovation to the man who, starting with some trees in whatever, 1948, always did it my way again and again and again. Okay, and now that the end is near, Amaris, the segments of the trip swing open like an orange. Wow, I'm so moved by this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess very simply we go from an image of linearity to one of circularity. And going back to what Ali articulated so well earlier, it seems that wandering around just really lets you sink into like the sensuality of the moment, to really savor it. And so it seems also to gesture to a sort of retrospection that after the journey has been lived, it sort of swings wide into what that means for you.
And that's so well put. And segments is kind of a pun. What are the two senses of segments here? Help her out.
Segments?
Yeah, right. The segments of the trip and the segments
Segments
of
of
the
a trip,
orange.
an itinerary, and segments. We call the pieces of an orange segments. So, okay, thank you. And inside the orange, Emily, the segments of the trip swing open like an orange. There is light in there, and mystery, and food.
It's perfect. It has everything you need. It's this type of utopian space. It's made possible by this rambling, aimless trip.
And this muttering old guy who's smiling to himself and seems wired differently and loves differently and writes differently. But in the end, if you open that orange, if you do what we've done for the past 40 minutes or so, you will find in there something for you, mystery and food. We will nourish you, and we will deliver you to your own smudge in the back of your soul. So then he invites us, Max, come see it.
Come see it. Come see the trip. This is where it is. You can come make your own sort of trip to see this.
Yeah.
This other trip. It's trips on trips.
Yeah. Lily, come. This is so great. Come not for me,
It
but
makes
it.
me so sad.
That's just amazing.
I think, come not for me, but it, because if you came for me, that would be idolizing me or naming me, or, you know, like, don't only think about me when I'm gone because you knew me as John Ashbery, your lover. Come and think about this, come to this like orangey place of mine when I'm gone.
And where would that be?
In this poem.
Here? In any of the poems?
But come for the memory of the places we went together, or the types of things we thought about together.
Yeah.
Not just...
Yeah, it was amazing to sit in the living room after Ashbery said that this was about David, and to have a sense that this is a valediction. This is saying, like, I did it my way, but you don't need me to have this. I've given you the poem. I mean, it's the most powerful version of meta poetry. Come not for me, not for Ashbery, who's always denied, even the way he reads his poems is as if he's saying, I'm not performing the poem, I'm giving you the poem, you can do what you want with it. I have a flat affect because I really don't know who I am, but I sure do know what I've done in the poems. So come back when I'm gone, and you will have it. You will have counterproductivity, but you'll also have this poem. But if I am still there, grant that we may see each other. Gosh.
I know. Killer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's come back for this process, come back for this reading, come back for this poem, come back for this walk, this trip we've taken together.
Yeah.
Come back for that.
Yeah.
But you might still find me in here.
I still might be there.
You might still be there under your boot soles.
And yeah, very much like the end of Song of Myself. Grant. Let's talk about the diction of grant. Grant that, Emily.
It's an imperative. It's a sort of antiquated language.
Where do we find a statement like this? Grant that we may.
And prayer.
Prayer.
Yeah.
It's a prayer. It's a benediction. This is not just a valediction. It's a benediction. May we see each other. Now that's what you say when you're dying to your loved one. Say, if you want, I don't believe in heaven, but I believe in poetry, so you can always find me here. Just all you have to do is walk around, and we'll walk around together. I'm so moved by this poem. It's amazing. Can we give some final words on this so I don't have to do it? Anybody? Lily, you got to meet Ashbery and spend days with him.
Yeah, it was incredible. The moment that you described, hearing him talk about how the poem relates to his relationship with David, was really moving. But I have a broadside that we printed to give him as a gift for when he was visiting up on my wall, and I read this poem probably every day.
And what does the poem, is it the entire poem?
It is the entire poem, yeah.
Yeah, we gave it to him. Mm-hmm. Dave, thoughts?
Just another thought about what we were saying, that relationship. It's, we're talking about journey, but he could also be, in a more literal sense, talking about the relationship. Come not for me, but for it. The more important thing in the relationship is what it is together. Not me, not the person, but what we have together. Mm. The journey is of our relationship, the experience.
Max?
I like thinking about this poem in relation to Curly's I Know a Man, because there's a completely, totally different shift between just walking around an object of curiosity some and drive, for Christ's sake, look out where you're going.
Yeah.
And just thinking of these ways of moving and of being and of moving through, moving not only through space, but moving through life, moving through the poem. We have a few different ways of thinking about that, and I think that Ashbery gives us a really compelling reason to walk around rather than to drive straight through.
Nice. It's very alternative. It's just mildly so.
Yeah.
I'd say. Yeah. Generally about Ashbery. He's a really radical guy, but it just sneaks up on you, I think.
Exactly.
Anna?
I just think this is spectacular, and it just makes me want to go for a walk.
That's pretty cool. Allie?
Yeah, I've just had I've gotten chills at during several instances in this conversation, and I think it's just when we've gotten to certain lines and through the process of verbally just walking around.
Like which line?
We've been discussing it.
Was really powerful for you.
So many, but I mean, just in the past couple of minutes, come not for me, but it. and even Lily just saying like, this is what makes me so sad, like, and then of course the last line. But yeah, it just makes me want to, I think, like, not having names for things, it makes me not want to, like, say a final word about the poem, but just leave
That's
it for
right.
a while and then read it again.
Yeah, good point. Amaris?
I think it's such a beautiful celebration of slow development, of disorientation, of sort of sinking into the moment and being guided by your intuition or your feeling, and not making, I guess, the name or the object of your affection be also the object, your destination, but that journey together, like Anna was saying earlier.
Yeah, we've read a lot of poems and even looked at a lot of sculptures that interrogate things like God, sort of traditional sort of spirituality, traditional ideas of divinity. And I think, we've talked about this in other classes with you, Al, the whole Nietzsche thing, that the point of art. Am I right about this is Nietzsche, that the point of art is to fill the vacuum that some absent God leaves behind?
Yes.
And for me, this poem makes that explicit and also more touching, because it's not really concerned with a divinity or a spiritual figure. It's concerned with preserving an idea of heaven in the space of art. It's sort of not something to worship, but a place to commune. And that's, I guess, the most touching thing that art can really do for us. I think.
Well, what's remarkable for me is that this could possibly serve as a bookend of a career that began with some trees, which is exploring the special conditions of love thought of in a certain way, and creating a statement about relation and relationship, relation between and among words, relationship between and among people. And the end of this poem, Come Not For Me But It, If I'm Still Here, Grant That We May See Each Other, in the poem, reminds me of our days put on such reticence, these accents seem their own defense. If you come back to that place under the trees, Ashbery's not there, but the self-sufficiency of the wandering around, right, that Niedecker and Corman discovered, and Creeley tried to get us to see, all of that work that people have done, that these poets have done. Finally, the poem speaks for itself, and it is food, and it is mystery, and it can be itself sufficient for us to explore all the alternatives we need to stop rushing from A to B and just walk around. It's been fun walking around with you guys, for sure.